How's it going, beautiful people? And thank you for tuning in to the High Fantasy Podcast. Today, Shalini and I are delving into the world of Uhtred, son of Uhtred, in Bernard Cornwell's The Last Kingdom. Fantastic novel, awesome show, can't wait for more to come out, and it is absolutely stunning. I can't wait to talk about it, and hope you enjoy.
Destiny is all.
That's true.
What did he say? I'm a Dane for life.
I'm a Dane for life. It's like the most bro quote ever, as applicable to the time period.
I'm in this frat shit for life.
Yeah. So folks, today we're going to be talking about The Last Kingdom by Bernard Cornwell. And I'm of course referring to the novel, but there is a great TV show that is on Netflix, and Shalini and I have watched this. Mm-hmm. I think we've actually watched some of the stuff twice.
Yeah, I think so.
Like, didn't we marathon season 1 to 3 or something?
I think we started again a little bit, and then maybe we switched out of it, but I really want to watch it again now. We were, like, reviewing some clips, and it's just so good.
It's a really well done medieval period show, and yet again, here's us breaking our own genre, because it's supposed to be high fantasy. This is, of course, a historical fictional novel / TV show, and again, really well done. I love how, like, there's lots of historical accuracy, and in terms of weapons and armor, like, it's very believable that people would have donned or wielded these kinds of things back then. And there's a lot of historical characters that were real, that were, I think, again, very realistically portrayed. So it kind of, I think it manages not to lend too much to legend, but it still has this kind of fantasy feel in that there is kind of direct allusions in later seasons, like to magic and to sorcery and stuff like that. And it's just cool. And it's an interesting, part of British history and medieval history overall, because I think there's an allure to the Viking conquests. There's something about it that's kind of neat. And because they went to so many different parts, not only of Europe, but also in Africa and in the Middle East, etc., I think there's kind of, like, everywhere in the world has something that relates to them. I don't know how to put it, but you can.
They're kind of like an empire that was never really an empire. Like, they just kind of conquered things for the shits and giggles and glory, as opposed to like the more deliberate spreading of culture and power and, like, establishment of, like, the Roman empires and the Mongol Empire and all those kind of things.
Yeah,
so
it wasn't like a concerted effort. And it was something that happened over the span of hundreds of years, right? It's not like it's a singular, definable time period even necessarily.
And I think there's always something appealing about the Vikings, and, the Danes of today are not the Danes of yesteryear, right? And they were quite free-spirited, and just, while they were violent, they were also playful, and they just kind of did what they wanted to do. It's not the IKEA version that we have today.
No, definitely not. Yeah, they're not like the Muppet Man who does popcorn.
The Swedish chef.
Yeah. So long story short, we like the show a lot. Can't wait for season 4. That's going to be fantastic.
Whenever that comes out.
Whenever that, I'm going to say 2021 is probably when it's going to
Probably.
Hope not. I hope at least fall of 2019. Excuse me, 2020.
2020.
See, we're already in the new year and I'm still fucking up. So long story short, we really like the show, as you can tell. But I also really enjoyed Bernard Cornwell's novel. It's really good. And I grin in recognition quite often because having watched the show first, there were so many things that the show adapted very well from the book, and that was kind of nice. And I think overall, in terms of the main difference, I think it's just like the book takes a lot. It's actually quite fast-paced for a novel. Like, it covers big chunks of time relatively quickly. I think there's a lot more stuff in it that relates to Uhtred's past. Like, I think in the show they go very quickly to him being, like, a man who's like now like a warrior seeking renown. Book takes a lot more time to kind of discuss who he is, but also it establishes where we are in terms of history, like and geography and stuff like that. And it does include like a good like map of England, right? And it shows where the different kingdoms are. Really helps establish the kind of political realities of the time. Like there's references obviously like to regicide, infanticide, and there's lots of period specific stuff. Like they talk about blacksmithing, they talk about crop rotations, Yule, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so it helps establish the kind of life that this character has because he's the narrator of it. And that's one thing I love that they did was the show is basically the same. Like he's this kind of unreliable narrator. In the book, he gets very sarcastic, and there's lots of moments where Cornwell really does a good job in shifting the tone and pace of dialogue like per scene. So when it's like a fight or like a really intense scene, there'll be lots of small details that are shown about like what's going on.
Yeah.
But you're still getting mostly Uhtred's thoughts. And then there's some other ones where it's him just doing like that long style narration where it's just, I became 17 and then I went to, I took my horse and my blade and went blah, blah, blah. So I think it was cool to read a novel that's like that. And for historical fiction, I think it works. And there's something about doing it where it's almost like a biography.
Yeah.
That I think makes it more believable because we can relate to people as individuals. And I think that Uhtred is a really very cool protagonist character who is like a physical prodigy. He's definitely has lots of problems and is very imperfect, and he has sometimes like that kind of gray morality that I think is quite popular, but it's not Witcher level. Like he's not like that. I think he's still mostly just kind of like a self-interested dude who just wants to reclaim what's been taken from him, which in this case is basically his kingdom and his title, like his I guess right,
does he want to be king? No, he wants to be a lord, right?
Yeah,
Bebbanburg.
Yeah, like he just wants renown is his whole quest. Like like they say, destiny is all, and he talks about how warriors are always striving for reputation. Like that's what they want. Yeah, because like you can get a whole bunch of glory and riches and stuff, and then go and become chubby in a castle, and then like you're not relevant anymore. So I think that he's kind of afraid of that, and that's what he's seeking to kind of overcome in a way.
Right. So he kind of has applied the sort of Danish life goal of glory, like a lot of young men and warriors, like of that time. And he's applying that to like his birthright as an English nobleman.
Yeah, and that relates to one of the biggest themes of both the show and the book, which is Uhtred being a man of two different cultures, basically, that are both at war with each other. So, and that is represented in himself. Even in the Last Kingdom novel, there's, I think, like a dozen times when he's confronted with this kind of reality. Like, you either have to kind of choose to be a Dane and then you just kind of stick with that lifestyle and then you're always raiding, but then have a very kind of like uncertain life, I guess you can say, to a certain degree. But also it's like what he feels most comfortable, I think, being as ultimately. Yeah. Or at least more so. Or you can be this English disposed nobleman who's going to then struggle and try to reclaim everything, but has to go through other English lords, basically, to get there. And Uhtred is too proud, which is why he has this inevitable conflict with Alfred, who's like this very dutiful, deliberate kind of guy. Yeah. He's portrayed so well in the show. Like, it's exactly book him. Like, it's perfect. I think that for a lot of readers, having kind of a split identity crisis is something that resonates. Like, I know for me, because I personally have ancestry in a couple different like places, so I know that for me that's kind of something that I can relate to. But his is in the context of like much more perilous stuff than living in Canada. where it's all snowy and cold and safe. For the most part.
For the most part.
Winter tires, folks. But yeah, there's no winter tires in this time too. So again, like I think in that sense the novel is a bit darker than the show. Like show has lots of violence, and I think it's done well, and the action is reasonably good. It leans heavy on the character drama part, and I think that is overall what the first novel is also mostly about. There's not a whole lot of action until towards like the very end, and that's when he fights Ubba, which the show did really well, like so intense, and I think it captured that reasonably good.
Terrified for Uhtred like the entire time, like
this
crazy guy.
Yeah, and there was tons of foreshadowing, and for this specific example, like way early on, he's told by he's an Englishman who is blind, but is like very wise, and he actually he knows how to speak Danish, and he's like a counselor to a couple of the Jarls. He tells Uhtred explicitly, like verbatim, never cross Ubba, never fight Ubba, because he's just he's so crazy, like he's so good at fighting, and then he's superstitious, so he thinks that he has to win, which means that he'll go to like any length to be victorious, and lo and behold, later on, Uhtred ends up doing that.
Yes, because that's the rule of a story. If someone tells you to not do it, that means it's gonna happen. Yeah. They're gonna do it. Since I've only watched the TV show and haven't read the book, it's interesting to hear that the like first person portrayal is done well in a TV show, because it's very hard to kind of put a first person narrative into a TV, because you're never going to be that character. Like it's not going to be like a first person shooter kind of like view of the whole show. Can you imagine if that if that was how it would be? So that's obviously not doable. So it's kind of interesting that you still kind of see the precariousness of the unreliable narrator of the book in the TV show. You know, again, talking about the mechanics of filming a TV show, you can't really show the sort of backstory of a character that easily. It's just kind of, you know, the march forward of time, unless you want to put flashbacks or something, but it doesn't really work. Like, unless you do something like in the Vikings, where they kind of have like visions and things like that, but it's not the same with the show.
Yeah, and I guess that's where we're also going to segue, because I kind of wanted to avoid this, but I think it is.
It's inevitable.
So we also watched the show Vikings, which is also another great show, and it's not high fantasy, yes, but it's historical fiction, and it's based on the legends of Ragnar Lothbrok, and then his, 6 sons or 7 sons?
Yeah, I don't know.
He has a lot of fucking sons. Okay, and funny enough, like, well, the Vikings show actually, it attempts to show what Vikings did over the course of hundreds of years in the context of like one lifetime, so it's not realistic like that, but it's like around, I guess, season 4-ish of Vikings is kind of where Last Kingdom sort of begins. So Ragnar's you know, he came to England, he raided, established a settlement, it was destroyed, and then later developed interests elsewhere, and then he ended up being, you know, he ends up dying at some point. I'm not going to spoil it for you where exactly it happens or why. But anyway, his sons all come to Britain and raid in different parts and try to establish settlements, and then are fighting with various peoples throughout Britain for a long time. And again, that's the context in which Uhtred's story began. It's like the Danes have already been here for, you know, however many odd years, and are just now starting to expand and go even further and further and further.
And isn't Ragnar's son Ubba the Ubba of...
Exactly,
like, and he's like 40 or something, or like maybe a hard 35. And
he looks like he's like 60, but he's probably just like 32 or something.
So he's the one that Uhtred fights, and he is the first son of Ragnar?
I think so.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think he's the first one.
Yeah. It's like meta.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and then Ivar the Boneless is portrayed in the book differently. Like, he doesn't have deformity; he's just super skinny.
Right.
So like the Viking show interprets it like he doesn't have leg bones. But yeah, so going back to your point about like the feel of it, it doesn't really fit to have flashbacks to Uhtred's past, and I think his character is too much, I think, forward thinking as opposed to someone who lives in the past.
Yeah.
And then has to like overcome their their own limitations in terms of what's holding them back from getting there.
Yeah.
It's more so like he just has the past. It is what it is, but now he knows what he wants, and it is fulfilling something that was missing or he never had. I guess to be put it more pointedly, accurately. But even when Ragnar dies, like his adoptive Dane father, you can tell that has long-lasting kind of consequences to him in terms of how he feels and. Again, this kind of torn allegiance, and like we're obviously jumping a little bit ahead in terms of the focus of what this novel did. Like, we're already 3 seasons into the show, and we can still see that like Uhtred doesn't really fit anywhere. He doesn't fit in either camp, and that's kind of what makes him a unique character. He's kind of like his own hero and his own faction, I guess you can say, at the same time.
Yeah.
And there's just those that are loyal to him or those that he is able to convince that he's good for.
Yeah.
I
got something you need.
Yeah.
Basically is his motto.
Yeah.
So I kind of thought of an interesting question, because in a show, it's kind of hard to show inner conflict, like within oneself. I think we always bring up Lord of the Rings. There's like not a single podcast where we don't. But I think the Fellowship of the Ring did a really great job of portraying how Frodo was really uncertain of himself throughout their journey as they go through these different lands in Middle Earth, and how they show him alone in a frame and everyone else together in a different frame to kind of show his isolation and his sort of like fear of, he knows he has to go and do this by himself and he can't like depend entirely on the Fellowship. So I'm interested to know, because in The Last Kingdom, the show, it's not as easy to see Uhtred's inner conflict, and I was wondering if you kind of came across that in the book, or do you really think that he knows who he is, and it's more like external conflicts that he meets, like the Danes and the Englishmen?
Yeah, in the novel, it is really clear that he has those internal conflicts, and they're parsed against external ones of the harsh medieval world that he's a part of and the war that's going on, basically. He does at times, he expresses how he feels kind of isolated or like he's in a unique position, but there's also times when he feels very confident and he feels like he's fulfilling his destiny. And there's a lot of references to the spinners, meaning like the rotating, spinners of fate at the base of the Tree of Life, Yggdrasil in Norse mythology. So he still he still believes in all of that to a certain extent. I think much greater than he does in God, like the Christian God. That is brought up so many times. It's probably like over 20 times that the spinners comes up, and so there's a sense of it kind of oscillates. Like, yes, when things are going his way, he goes, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is my destiny, etc., etc. I'm the guy. I'm the warrior. And then when things are going horribly wrong, that's when he goes, curse the fate, right? The spinners laughed at me this day or something. So definitely like a strong ideology of self, if that's what you're kind of getting at.
Yeah, I guess so. It's because every story, there's like external conflict and internal conflict. At least like most good stories have both of those things. It's very rare to just have one or the other. So I was just wondering what Uhtred's sort of inner conflict would be. And I guess it is that sort of sense of loyalty, because, it seems like he only has himself most of the time, but he is connected to 2 different factions who are like opposed to each other vehemently. So yeah, I guess that's kind of where he needs to go see a therapist. Like
Yeah.
every other protagonist.
Yeah, definitely needs to go to counseling. Just figure out, and then the counselor goes, Uhtred, do you really need to fulfill all these things in order to feel like a whole person? Are you striving for contentment, or do you, because I want to reclaim my fucking throne?
I am a Dane for life.
Yeah. This does read like it's an account written by a medieval warrior, and there's lots of humor, and that I think that's the thing that I like about it, is it's another thing where it's not attempting to be like a dark fantasy, like a grim dark, because that is just so, I think it's been beaten the shit out of, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there can be humor, but it's probably not as playful. It's more like a sardonic, like, the whole world's gone to shit kind of thing.
Like gallows humor type crap. This is a funny excerpt showing Uhtred's hilarity and awesomeness as a narrator from chapter 8. So Alfred is on a ship with Uhtred and this man named Leofric, and he's the one who calls him Arsling, which is also in the show.
Iconic.
I fucking love that word. It's like the best insult.
Arsehole.
It's like you're an ass, but like you're like an insignificant Spawn version of it. You're like an assling.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. They spell it like
Assling.
it's like EARS-ling.
Oh my god. Arsling.
Yeah, it's all this old English crap, right?
That's so...
Yeah. Everything is named Ethelwald, Ethelfled, Ethelred, Ethelbert, Ethelburp, Ethel crap, Ethel whatever.
Ethel shit.
Yeah, Ethel poop. So they're on this ship, and then they encounter a couple of Danish like pirating vessels, and then they have a little engagement with them. But lo and behold, Uhtred, who is now kind of in the service of Alfred, sort of unofficially, it's just like a shit test for Uhtred actually at this point, he encounters Ragnar, like not his father, his adoptive father, it's his son who survives.
Oh yeah,
like
young Ragnar.
Yeah, he wasn't killed in the hearth fire. Is that what it
hearth fire?
Yeah, or
well, the house just burned down.
Yeah, the hall burned down.
Yeah.
So Uhtred calls out to Ragnar and is like, holy shit, dude, you're here! Like, oh my god. And they're speaking in Danish, and Alfred, being the guy he is, you fight well, Uhtred. We fought badly, Lord, I said. And that was true. Their shield wall had held, and if they had not retreated to rescue their ships, they might have even beaten us back into the sea. I had not done well. There are days when the sword and shield seem clumsy, when the enemy seems quicker, and this had been one such day. I was angry with myself. You were talking to one of them, Alfred said accusingly. I saw you. You were talking to one of the pagans. I was telling him, Lord, I said, that his mother was a whore, his father was a turd of hell, and that his children are pieces of weasel shit. He flinched at that. It's just...
And this is him talking to Ragnar and being like, yo, bro, what's up?
Yeah. We'll meet later kind of thing. So they actually end up meeting after that. I don't want to spoil it too much, but it's funny because Alfred is this very, very precarious seeming ally, or how do I explain this? Alfred can see through everything. But the thing is, he's also blinded by faith, and this is a very common thing.
Well, he also doesn't have a choice, right? Like, he has to trust Uhtred because he has the power and the strategy to overthrow the Danes and kind of get what he wants, right? And unite England.
Yeah.
So he has to put up with Uhtred's shit and just hope that he doesn't betray him too badly at any point.
True, and at this point, to be fair, like, Alfred doesn't really know Uhtred that well.
Yeah.
He's obviously knows like he's a pagan who's kind of playing at trying to be a Christian lord, and again, this was like a test to see how Uhtred could handle himself, but it wasn't a good fight. Like the first one that he actually has where he fights in a shield wall, it's him and a company of Danes. This is much earlier, and they fight some Welsh, because the Welsh are also like a part of the story, but they're kind of insignificant. They're just the ancient enemy, quote unquote, of the English. And so there's like a raiding party of them that they encounter, and then Uhtred ends up using serpent breath and wasp sting in all their glory and just utterly destroys like 2 or 3 of them, and then they end up repelling.
Those sound like D&D spells, to be honest.
Yeah.
What is it? Serpent sting and serpent's breath and wasp sting?
Wasp sting, yeah. Serpent's breath is the sword, and then wasp sting is the axe.
Oh, cool.
Just kind of like a long knife sort of thingy.
Yeah.
That the Saxons used.
So what do you think was done better in the book, and what do you think was done better in the show in terms of displaying the story?
Well, the show is more action. It's definitely more oriented towards that than the book is. But the show is also still heavy on the character drama and the conflicts. But I think the show, it does capture the pace really well of Uhtred's narration and how he tells the story. I think I like the book just a little bit better for showing aspects of medieval life and the distinctions between Danes and the English at this point in history in terms of culture.
Yeah.
I think it gets more into detail about that. But again, both are really well done. I'm definitely looking forward to reading more of Bernard Cornwell's series. Like, it's really entertaining. It's funny. It's also gritty, and there's a lot of really good character arcs that are like, I'm just seeing the start of some of them, and I kind of know where they're gonna go because of the show, obviously. And I can't wait what it's actually gonna be like, and make more comparisons from there, because it's just an ever interesting thing to kind of see how different mediums take the same story and then try to show them. So
Yeah.
It
closes the book.
We're wrapping it up, folks.
Wrapping it up. And I think the next time we pick up with the Last Kingdom series, we'll delve more into each season or different characters and things like that. We'll definitely be rewatching it soon so we can talk a bit more about the specificities. But until then, I hope you enjoyed our overarching analysis, and stay tuned for more.
Thank you, and be a Dane for life.
Yeah. God. That's so bad.
It's terrible.
Sorry to all the Danes out there.
Ciao. Check out the description of this video and you can see the different platforms we put our content on, as well as our social media links. Thanks again, and see you next time.